Hey everybody, it's Peter Robbins with Wargaming with Peter. This is the Dawn Patrol video cast, I guess is what you would call it. We kind of do it at any time and any day, so that has no regularity whatsoever. That's how we roll. I have with me Jacob Keys, scenario designer for the Desert Falcon showcase for Command Modern Operations, and I've been kind of told on the side that this was one of your first designs, is that, or at least official designs, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say first for public consumption.
Right. So just tell me a little bit about how you got involved with Matrix and Slytherin, etc. And
Well,
go ahead.
my start with Matrix was about coming up on 3 years ago. They were looking for people to help puckster a war game being run remotely for Marine Corps University out in Quantico. This was back in COVID time, so it was all remote still.
Hmm.
They just brought me on just for that one war game. I ran with one team, and then my friend Ethan, who put my name out there, ran the other team, the other half, because they split the war game into two to make it easier to do remotely.
Hmm.
A few months after that, they were looking for somebody to help Ethan. He's our database manager. They were
Hmm.
looking for somebody to help him with research and maintaining and managing Command's database. So that's when they asked me if I wanted to send in a resume. I obviously said yes because it's
Right.
been a fantastic opportunity, and the rest has been history. I've done now at this point 3 war games with the Marine Corps. Um,
Okay.
most for Command Staff College, a couple for School of Advanced Warfighting.
Sure.
Uh, Previously, my whole job was just doing database research, but then starting June of this year,
And those
um, I transitioned full time, and that's when I began doing scenario design, kind of in house for Matrix.
and those uh, those groups are all at Quantico, Virginia. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, was your background in database at all, or database management at all, or do you have a technical degree? Or
No, no. My degree at the time when I was hired, I was still working on my degree is in political science.
yes,
The main I guess you'd say avenue of my work was the OSINT research side of things. Ethan
okay,
kind of handles the actual structure and managing of that database. I handle more of the population of it with information. So they brought me in just because I have a hobbyist kind of amateur
yeah,
background in OSINT.
right. Well, I mean that's a good combination. So let's dive right in here a little bit. Again, I'll go ahead and lay down a very significant spoiler alert. If you don't want to see anything related to this scenario, if you just want to keep it to really top level descriptions, I would go to the Desert Falcon DLC page and just read that top level summary. So we're going to get into this a little bit deeper, but as I promised to Jacob before we started, I'm not going to get it too far into the mission. I think maybe about half an hour or 45 minutes into it, just to kind of show some flights in motion, some thoughts about what I'm doing horribly wrong. He can tell me, or at least hint or nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Um, so before we look even at the description, what was the impetus for doing this particular scenario? I know you mentioned the Libyan operation.
Mm.
Um, so what was? Did you have that in mind, or already had it in mind, or already had like a smaller version of this? Not
Yeah, the initial thought was we wanted to show off some of the features that came in the war plan update. And personally, my favorite being the flight plan editor. That was the feature since I first started playing Command that I've been dying for, and I think they've done it perfectly. Of course, I'm biased, but so that was the one that I wanted to plan something out that required more complex tanking than just meet tanker at X, refuel, carry on, right? Multiple legs of tanking, or even potentially, like I'm losing the term, but when the tanker flies with the strike package, like we saw
Mhm.
in the El Dorado Canyon. So that's where the initial start point began. Is okay, how do we create a scenario that requires an extremely long range strike that also doesn't leverage an aircraft carrier? Because the last two showcase DLCs, the Queen
Right.
Elizabeth and the Ford, were carrier focused. We didn't want to become the carrier DLC series. We wanted to be the showcase, right?
Right.
So it became a question of, okay, what matches these kind of geopolitical conditions where you have something that is ideally a landlocked country, um, that has involvements with another country that has tanking capabilities, but also not necessarily the basing access to make a strike like that um, convenient, right? And initially, the conversation was to really just kind of repeat El Dorado Canyon in the sense of which is modern, upgraded equipment. U.S. F-15s coming out of England, moving to strike something in Central Africa, and make up an excuse why there are no carriers doing this task. But I kind of realized that's kind of boring. I mean, that is just a functionally El Dorado Canyon, but with things upgraded. Um, so then the idea came about of France, since this is the Francophone Africa that we're dealing with. They have heavy involvements. Or they do, and they kind of don't now, right? But
Right.
at the
Right.
time, this was before all that kicked off. So we started looking at it, and I say we, I really mean me yelling all these ideas at Ethan and him just acting as a sounding board for me. But I decided to look at France because we haven't really done anything. I think for a major military power and a major pillar of the NATO alliance, there's
Yeah.
really not a ton of representation in commands, at least official scenarios
Right.
for it. So that's kind of how we got to the point of, okay, long
I mean,
range
that's what
French strike in Central Africa.
just straight up. That's what attracted me to it at the beginning with it. I mean, France has very good airframes in particular. Right?
Yeah.
I still love the Mirage series, of course, as well as the Rafale,
Hmm.
which of course reminds me a good bit of the Eurofighter, but has its own French qualities, I guess would be the way of putting
That's a good way of putting it.
it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but what was interesting, and I'll just say this real quick, is while I was thinking about this, like while I was actually trying to approach it from a JIPO, a JIPOE, kind of, I guess for anybody else watching more army oriented, it would be the IPB, or the intelligence preparation of the battlefield. I I noticed, I was like, I don't know, there's not a lot of seed capability here, right? And the irony of that is, I think France just announced that by 2030 they're going to add seed indeed to the Rafale C. So that was kind of interesting. I just happened upon that article, and literally like within a half hour sitting there, I was like, yeah, there's not much seed capability here. I'm very much like a Falcon 4 BMS flyer, so I'm very seed oriented, and
Hmm.
so I was a little thrown. I was thrown by that a little bit in my planning, but then I noticed you had an incredible amount of longer range. I think that's kind of like the strong point of the scenario is you're kind of selling the longer strike or ER based cruise missiles, and the Globemaster I was like, oh man, it doesn't have Rapid Dragon, does it? And I said, yep, it does. So that's interesting. I do want your opinion on in the scenario itself, how potentially the United States would interact in this whole scenario. But we'll kind of get into the
Yeah.
the deep end of the pool here in a second. Let me let
Absolutely.
you continue. Sorry. I
Yeah.
hope
And
you
I mean, like you said about the Rafale having kind of like the Eurofreighter but French characteristics. That was something that really shocked me. You kind of expect it. Every military procures equipment based on their own national strategic focus. That's day one, right? But um, a lot of times it doesn't really hit the mark, or a lot of times it's built on assumptions that maybe were true when they started the process in the '90s.
sure,
That's not true
sure,
in 2020. The thing that just blew me away was the range rings in command lined up perfectly where the Rafale with its deep strike loadout, you need to tank off once there, once back, to go from southern France to Chad.
Right.
I
Right.
can't imagine that was just a happy coincidence. That seems like a very much a deliberate design. Somebody sat down, and you look at we're talking Storm Shadow, or the French call it a Scalp EG, and Rafale M's, or excuse me,
Hmm.
Rafale C's.
Hmm.
These were things that were procured in the mid to
Late
late 90s and the
90s. Yeah.
early 2000s. So we're talking,
Right.
in this scenario, it's set place in 2028, but when we started the process, none of the issues that France was having in Mali and in Chad and Niger were really a thing at that point. The scenarios proved a tiny bit prophetic in that regard. So this is
Hmm.
something that 20 years ago, somebody had this conversation. Like I said to you, people in the French procurement office talked about this and probably wargamed this out on pen and paper and came to these decisions about this
Capability
contingency plan.
necessary. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And the thing that I appreciate about it is that they weren't operating from the assumption that N'Djamena Airfield will always be accessible to the French or Djibouti or
Hmm.
any other forces in Mali. They didn't operate under that assumption. They operated in the assumption that the only airfields they can guarantee on being there are the ones in France. And
Right.
I think that it's a level of foresight that is shockingly precious these days, I feel.
Well, let me start up the scenario, and we're just going to give everybody a little bit of an order of battle run through, just to kind of show you where things are, what the general intent is, what the original suggested phases are. I'm not going to get too much into what I thought of. In addition to that, I'm writing an article on that. It might take me a little bit. As I got into this, I was really thinking, so how much are you getting? What is the bang for the buck in here? Ultimately, you don't want to necessarily get into that while you're doing a review, but there's a lot in this mission. I have to tell you for me, that's the selling point. Is I know I'm going to play this many times because I know I'm going to screw it up royally several times before I before I find the sweet combination here, because really you don't know too much about what's
Mhm.
going on. So I don't know if you want. Maybe I'll give you the floor, so I'm not talking the whole time. Do you want to just kind of like go over the situation just a little bit, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty here? Maybe if you just start with the situation.
Yeah, so this comes from a position, I call it kind of the African fall of Saigon, right? Where the French forces have been displaced, and the what remains there and the French citizenry there has to be evacuated because of the rise of an extremist group in the government of Chad. I'll tell you, originally, it was supposed to be a government that took over the governments of both Chad and neighboring Niger. And it was originally going to be a combination of both of their militaries' uh, forces. I kind of narrowed the focus down a little bit. So I picked one of the countries, and I picked Chad. And the irony is, history proved me that I should have gone with the other one, probably, to be more accurate. But
Yep.
um, it takes place in 2028, and that was deliberately done so that I can make some changes with the force composition of the Chadians. Their
Hmm.
military is entirely based now in 2023, at least, around counterinsurgent operations. They don't they have three MiG 29s
Hmm.
with air to air missiles for intercepts, and that's it. Three old Ukrainian MiG 29s that were sold to them 10 years ago. So we did a little tweaking. We said, okay,
Well,
go,
you can assume in a few years, maybe
right,
especially if they're considering this, they probably considered this for probably years, if not
exactly.
more. So
And
yeah, I don't think it's a far stretch. So.
that's why I went with the JF-17 specifically because it's a aircraft built for export. That
Right,
the November variant got play in neighboring Nigeria pretty significantly. So I felt like it was a
right, and
reasonable.
and quite honestly, China is trying to reach into Africa significantly.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh yeah.
and it wants to be a world power. It's probably the best place for them to try, because
Absolutely.
yeah, it's the most unstable yet even accessible from through via the Indian Ocean region. And so
Mhm.
yeah, keep going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. All good. We built it out with I keep saying we, but it was like I said again, just really just me just pulling aside anybody I can to rant at, so that I'm not just talking to myself alone. Uh, when I went through and I made this, we armed the JF-17s with the PL-9 just to keep it a little bit more reasonable uh, in terms of their air-to-air capabilities.
Hmm.
Then the other stuff, the MiG-29s, the Su-25s, the Hercuses, those are all organic, currently in Chadian service, along with the vast majority of their anti-air systems. Um, I think the only exception being the HQ-12 was kind of another hypothetical export that they don't currently have. Fun story actually about the one radar in the scenario, the flat face. I couldn't find any information on Chadian air defense radar. I don't think they have any. The only one I was able to find was a single flat face, which was captured from Libya during the Toyota Wars. They
Oh
captured
wow.
two of these things. They gave one to the French for research. They kept one for themselves. So that's
Yeah.
the only. So this is a country that does not have any air defense capabilities whatsoever. So there was a deliberate effort had to be made to make the assumption, okay, starting today, they prioritized this as a focus for their procurement. What would that look like? Hence the
Right.
JF-17s, hence
I
the
mean,
HQ-12s.
my assumption going into this is that they're. I mean, even though they might not be present in the scenario, but they're very well at this point could be forces from other nations that are embedded
Right.
and training them. You never know at this point. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I was approaching this scenario as I was starting to plan for it as if I would be surprised by something.
And that's the
Um,
hope.
right
Yeah.
there you
That
go.
was kind
So
of
let's
part of my
go. Let's so again the enemy forces you've laid out the SAMs, the HQ-12s, SA-6 gainfuls, MiG-29s, SU-25. You also mentioned that they have probably
yeah.
limited missiles, right? Probably like 2 to 4 an airframe, if that. We don't know necessarily. And then 12 JF-17Ns with PL-9 missiles, also assuming there's probably a limited amount per airframe. It's also a known confirmed fact, I assume, that they have Hercules, Spartan, Hercus C as well. So
Mhm.
that's all their air forces. Ground capabilities. Here is the flat face radar. Gainfuls, everything is pretty. This was interesting too. So they do have Stinger missiles.
Yep.
Thank you, United States. At some point, somebody sold something to somebody
Yeah. Exactly.
and some man portable air defense systems as well, man pads, SA-16 gimlets. I don't know if you want to just say anything else about the enemy forces, at least the known forces.
No, I mean it's I think it's pretty sure. I think we've covered it.
Then we start getting the friendly forces. Maybe why don't we talk about it from a high level, and then I'll go to the OOB and we'll start showing it on the map a little bit. So
Yeah.
just cover this summary, and then we'll kind of go to the scenario and kind of talk it through just a tiny bit.
So, like I said, this scenario assumes that a massive amount of their of the French bases throughout Africa have been, for whatever reason, removed. They're not viable anymore. So it became a question about what assets they have, basically in southern France, and or naval assets. Again, removing the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier from it. So we have the Tournier, which is a amphibious assault ship. Actually, is now currently off the coast of Syria with everything going on, and that's loaded with H-160M Gepard helicopters. Those are just starting to enter service now, so 2028. They're kind of brand new. These were picked mainly because of their ability to air-to-air tank, which again is pretty much a highlight of this scenario. Besides that, you have the Libreville International Airport as a fallback position for your logistics and where you're evacuating everybody. You then have the airfield, the Messina airfield itself in Chad, which is the site of the evacuation. That's being defended by two ad hoc groups of French Marines, approximately a company each, so a little less than a battalion. Finally, you have on loan a C-17 from Ramstein in Germany. Oh, that's actually out of date. It says two here, but in the final scenario, I believe it's only one C-17 with Rapid Dragon and JASMs loaded. So you have a large amount of long range strike assets. You have a ton of tankers of the new Phoenix tankers. You have AWACS. You have obviously the Rafales, like we talked about, with their long range deep strike loadouts. But you have nothing that's close by, really. Everything you use, with the exception being the cargo aircraft, of course, is going to have to tank to get to the fight. And that was a main primary focus of this scenario.
And we'll take a good look at what distances are involved here in a moment. So let's go a little bit into the, I think you've touched upon it a little bit, but the actual mission and the intended execution phases.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you want me to do it? Or?
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
So basically, the main objective is to evacuate all French personnel from the Messines airfield, that fallback position, to Libreville. There's 500 civilians. For the sake of the game, they're grouped into 50 groups of 10. This number was chosen deliberately, that you can't do it in one go. You have to make multiple trips to do it. The problem is there's no air support anywhere close by. So to provide the actual cover for this operation, you have to gain air superiority using a combination of long-range strikes and very clever placing of tanking missions and caps, and then bring in the transport aircraft to evacuate the civilians to Libreville.
Yep, and I'm already kind of running. You'll feel it very quickly. It's very much a juggling match. I really like this scenario. The one thing I do want to point out is you kind of called out the ops planner MSP cargo 2. One of my favorites, of course, is the palletized munitions, which I can't wait to deploy here, and that's what I kind of wanted to discuss with you. Like, there isn't a huge amount of mention of like rules of engagement going into it, and I'm assuming just for the fun factor that they're going to probably. Oops, I didn't mean to stop that. But let me show folks where those tutorials are that you were talking about. The MBSPTs are the MBSP tutorials are here under tutorials, air warfare tutorials. There's also a really good package that Matrix Games did, a video series on this too, and once we're done with this, I'll link that as well, because I found those to be a nice summary level. Also, Cargo 2.0 is discussed in those videos pretty well. Sorry, let me get back into where we were. Quickly, boom, boom, boom. Now let's get into the meat of it.
Yep.
All right, so this let's kind of point out some of the things that we were just talking about. So the Messines airfield that the French citizens basically retreated or gathered at with some defensive units are here. Let's kind of get in on this just a little bit to kind of show you where show the positioning of the troops around the airfield, etc. There's not a huge amount of objects there, but that's fine. And then here, this I'm assuming was recently taken over out of all of them. This is the most just from the fact that it's considered hostile, but the area nearby is still considered obviously a neutral civilian area with several universities, I'm sure hospitals and schools right next door too. So this, I don't know if you necessarily had pointed out where the enemy was more than likely concentrated. Of course, the flat face is up here, so there's an assumption that there's probably a good amount of air forces here. The enemy has an airfield here. Otherwise, these are training camps, which any number of potential mobile infantry, probably not large scale, but large enough to give a battalion some problems, probably. So we'll see. Anything else you wanted to talk about as far as what's visible here within the confines of Chad?
No. Yeah, I think you
At
pretty much
least,
covered it.
yeah, at least based on known issues and known entities, because we really don't know necessarily where they have concentrated any of their equipment.
Right.
Oh, one
In the
other thing
case
I
of
wanted
Chad,
to, yeah.
oh, yeah. I was gonna say in the case of Chad, it's fairly easy because there's not too many actually paved runways in the country.
Right, right,
So there aren't many there aren't many potential places that could support a lot of aircraft.
right.
Even one that's designed to take off from a kind of an oblique runway like the MiG-29. So it kind of
So again,
limits
I'll
your options.
show. I wanted to show. Yeah, there's 45. There's, let's see, what does that say? 10. I can't read it very well. Okay, so there's a gas, but I didn't know if there was a cargo element here.
It's the building.
Okay, so I got to get down to the actual this single building itself.
No, you can just click on
This
the
one
group
then.
and
Oh shoot, we got.
yes. And
Ah,
oh, don't press that
so
button.
is what I
Jump.
just click. Yeah, okay. How do I see just the existing? Because there should be
Open
what,
up
400. I know I say it
on
again.
the menu on the right hand side of your screen. That panel.
Yes, you're right.
Uh,
I'm sorry. Yeah, and then right here.
and then cargo. Yep.
Yeah. Ah, there
There
you
you
go.
go.
All right. So one French national is 1 ton.
Oh, okay. That's one group of 10 French nationals.
Okay, there. So that's a very large French national. Yeah, 10 persons. All right. So sorry. Yeah. So that's a good over 300.
Yeah.
Excuse
We
me,
could have
over
done
400.
I could have done single personnel, but I just felt like that'd be just a lot of clicking for no reason. So 10 felt like a nice, healthy, you know, it's a group of people, you know.
Right. Right. So remind me again, I have not finished this mission.
Hmm.
So in order to pick them up, though, you have to get obviously cargo capable aircraft to physically land and then issue unload a transfer of cargo using what the Cargo 2.0 system
Yep.
between that airfield and the individual aircraft. And you're saying that it's probably at least 2 trips
Yeah.
from the nearby helo carrier or transport carrier. So let's go
Well,
look
if
at
you,
that.
it's gonna be more if you take the helos. There are atlases at Libreville that I would say I
You're
would
right.
at least recommend as the primary use. The helos are kind of
It's-
intended as a backup in the event that you lose some
yeah,
cargo
yeah.
planes. Let's see.
Probably not the worst idea in the world to keep them to get them airborne and kind of nearby on point, I guess, or at least ready to help or something. So let's take a look at this from the OOB perspective. This might be a little bit easier. Again, we're down in the Tonnerre group. So here's all the helos that we were talking about before.
Yep.
Parts. Hopefully I'm pronouncing these right.
One halo can basically carry one of those groups.
Mm-hmm.
So
They
there's
can carry up to 15, but each one of those, or 12. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
So that's that. There are no other air assets here, right? There are no.
Nope.
All right, and then they're protected by a couple destroyers, and one looks like a missile frigate. Okay, there we go. Here are the 2 land units we already looked at. Nice ERC-90 there. Love that. 3 platoons of French Marine. Let's see, Ramstein Air Base. Let's take a look at what's in each of these French airfields. This is where the lovely Globemaster is hiding out, which I love. I love the inclusion of this. And this has the Rapid Dragon here. Usually this only shows the one that's loaded. That's interesting. So these are the new palletized weapons systems that was introduced, I think, in the same major update. So that's interesting. I've not used that before myself. So I'll show you in my plan in motion here in a little bit where I'm putting it. What's very interesting is like you can't just throw missions out there. You can throw the mission out there, but you gotta guide them away from Libya, right?
Oh yeah.
Because you don't want anything going over Libya. And in my planning, I chose Algeria, Niger, and then from down here to Cameroon to make the approaches, because you never know when Egypt or Sudan might might start firing too. Who knows? So this was a cool thing. This was a cool addition. The addition of the ImageSat capable satellites in low orbit. I think you also have Clementine. I will say in my early portions of the scenario, Clementine does come into effect for me, and it picks up some ground mobile situations going on down here. I won't get into it. Istris. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. Istray. This is where there's a sentry for airborne early warning, and a good bit of the refueling. The newer MRTT, the A330-200s. These are nice. These are nice. Phoenixes.
Okay. Yep, the Phoenix is what they call it for service. That airbase there is where a huge capacity of the French tanker fleet is stationed. That E3 comes from another airfield. It's just attached, but that is that is where a huge portion of their tanker fleet originates from.
All right, and so that tells you a little bit about there. And then Orange Carita is where the majority of the Rafale Cs are, and you have them at least initially loaded out, right? I think they're all loaded out. Several cap flights, as well as 2 heavy deep strike versions loaded up here with the Skull BGs. Here we can take a good look at that. I think you mentioned that particular cruise missile when we were talking before. Let's see if it's highlighted. See, this is what I was expecting when I clicked on the Globemaster. That's kind of interesting. So here's the Scalp EG, and this is beautiful. I like modern missiles. I don't know why. there's just very purposely built. Like this is expensive and it's going to do some damage. So very powerful. How many do they carry of these? Just 1, right?
2, I believe.
Oh wow, those are large.
Yep.
How much do they weigh? This is a little bug I just found recently. It was like if you go back, it undoes the highlight button. Let's see. Here it is, right here. How much do these weigh? Wow.
1.3 tons.
You're carrying 2 of those. Wow. All right. See, it's a very capable fighter. It's I think a little bulkier than the Eurofighter. I think it probably has a little more of a payload capability, I would assume. So that's the bulk of it. So it's not what I like about the overall mission is it's not first of all, it's not overwhelming either, right? I know we all want like tons of resources, but it's also quite manageable too. It's very much a struggle to determine where to strike from and where to strike via and where to set your refueling. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to point out from the initial order of battle. I was going to just bring up where I was at so far.
No, I appreciate you mentioning the smaller scope of it, because that was a deliberate. I personally have more fun playing command scenarios that are kind of smaller in scale and more focused.
And I'll show you why I appreciate it. I'll show you why I appreciate it, because I'm one of those dolts that puts a few missions out there and then I manually adjust a bunch of stuff because there's I'm a control freak, I guess. I'm a command control freak where I like the micromanagement of it. I don't like, because I feel like it's either one or the other. It's before or during, it's like, and especially because you don't really know a lot. You don't have a huge amount of intelligence as to where things might come from. So you gotta kind of, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I kind of set myself more up in a staged fashion. Give me a moment. All right. So, and again, there's a few detections. There's not much. This isn't going to be a huge spoiler. I'm not going to go forward anymore. But Clementine has identified these. So this is SIGINT. Assuming that I think Clementine is primarily a visual-based system, if I recall correctly. No. Okay. I don't know what it means by this. Do you know what that means right there? Specific emitter rights.
If I remember correctly, and this is embarrassing because this is actually part of the job. This is part of my job to know this.
Sorry.
But if I remember correctly, it just means it can actually identify what it's detecting, as opposed to, say, like a radio direction finder, which can just say something is there.
Okay, so this is a pretty darn capable system. At least from what I found in. So Clementine had been right about here. What's really cool, you actually see the concentric path. But Clementine had come basically like right about here, and it picked up two enemy SAM locations. So this is interesting. What I found was interesting here is that it looks like is this a disputed area? No, this is, oh wait, maybe it is on the border. Maybe it is inside the border and I just saw it incorrect. Yeah, it's inside it. Okay. I thought it was in the other country. So
no, it's post-colonial borders. So for some reason, the capital of Chad is literally right on a river that acts as the border with Cameroon. I think it's actually the Niger River itself.
So right now, I have a few things going in the air. I went ahead and threw up the Hercules flight just to have it available, or at least to have it shorter. Just available near my caps and near my strikes. I went ahead and threw a cap up of, can't remember what I set it to. I think I initially set it to 4. I'm going to probably get 8 Rafales in the area here. I also had set a strike mission. Again, I'm not the most prolific command player in the world, so I did a 4 strike against the flat, against the heck is name radar here. They were a flat face, yeah. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to stage them. So like I'll set them, like as you can see right here, I set them to strike, but I might hold them back based on the situation. So I don't know. I've set them physically to not go over Libya. There's probably is there a way to set a no-fly zone?
Yeah, absolutely. If you draw it out in reference points, you can then go under the mission and reference points tab at the top there, and at the very bottom, no navigation zones. Okay,
there you go. So again, my naivete, but again, on my side, I like to kind of manually fly a little bit too. So yeah, that's my reason. That's what I thought. No, I just don't know what I'm doing. But I'm your typical player. So there you go. Probably I'm like your mainstream player. I don't know why I sent 4, but I got tankers going in there. Because maybe I don't know why I sent 4, but probably should have just sent 2 at a time. But there's a lot of aircraft coming, so I'm like, I threw up a pretty good amount. Interestingly enough, there's some civilian aircrafts coming out of Algiers, and I think there was something coming out of probably Paris area too. It might have flown off now. Or is it this? No, that's the Sentry. So again, I'm kind of setting myself up for striking. I'm with the Globemaster, excuse me. I'm trying to get him about here. Again, if you set a no-fly zone like that, or no, do weapons follow that instruction as well?
Weapons, so you can choose what goes through it. So you can say a weapon can't go through it, or you can say that just aircraft can't. You can choose which domain it applies to, which is
And those rapid
very
dragons,
handy.
those skalags, or I think those flag, those aren't waypoint oriented cruise missiles, are they?
The JASSM is, I believe.
Okay, the JASSM is, yes, probably.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's what confused me. I just kind of threw him out here. I'm just gonna start. I'm gonna throw the beasts down here. I just wanted to
Mhm.
get him out of the way, Libya. I don't want anything going near Libya.
Yeah.
So that's about it. I haven't gone in yet. I'm gonna time. I'm gonna time the helos once I know I have air superiority. At least I think it doesn't make sense to throw them. I'm assuming there's probably man pads here. Don't say anything yet. Uh, my assumption is that some of these ground units have man pads, so it's probably not a great idea to just throw the helos right at the base. I was wondering what happens if I just throw the helos right at the airfield right away. I don't know. I might do it sometimes. Um,
I've
probably
never
some
tried
death.
it, so I don't know.
So probably some death and mayhem. Oh, the one thing I liked in your scenario or your description was that, and I don't know if it's pointed this way or not, but you said basically, any French airframe being down basically is a failure of mission. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's literal or not.
So it's not super literal in the sense that it's just during all the playtesting, I never lost a single French aircraft to enemy fire. If you do your planning properly, the enemy is not your biggest concern. I lost tons to fuel mismanagement. That is really more than the terrorists in Chad. That's the biggest enemy, is miscalculating your fuel expenditure rates. So there
Right.
is at the very end of the scenario, it and I won't go into the super details about what it for the sake of the spoilers, but at the end of the scenario, it grades you on two axes:
Okay.
the number of civilians you extracted and the number of aircraft you lost.
Mm,
And depending on those variables, it gives you one of, I think, nine, if I remember correctly,
okay.
outcomes, depending on the different combinations of, we got all the civilians out, but we took massive casualties.
Right.
So that affects the I guess you could say the good ending, if you will, to use kind of a
Right.
RPG term.
In case folks aren't extremely command savvy, I do love that, as long as you have the flight set to be able to use a tanker, it does give you a pretty good indication of how far the tanker is from your flights at any given time. So again, from a manual, yes, there's fancier ways to do the refueling. I do have a refuel set I do have these points set as a support mission, of course.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming then just that it's not just the fact that the tankers are nearby. I'm assuming that also takes account, but the support waypoints, the tankers have a little bit more flexibility, just having at least set that
Mhm.
up. So that's it. I mean, it's a difficult simple mission. It's deceptively difficult
Mhm.
would be the way I would put it. From a timing perspective, you really kind of a potentially dangerous scenario, right? From a civilian perspective, too. There's a lot of questions as to how this would realistically play out, right?
Mhm.
Politically, geopolitically, and just, I mean, you can even see. I mean, there's embedded citizens in in all of these locations, really. So I literally was sitting here saying, oh, I'm gonna take the globe master and just annihilate this place. What about all the workers? Like,
Yeah.
it's, it's, it's the Death Star all over again.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, you got to kind of wonder, like, would do I need to absolutely annihilate everything? I almost wish you got dinged for any
Mm.
like casualties,
Yeah.
civilian side effects or something like that there.
I
But
think it
so
was Belugan, who made there was a scenario that was floating around years ago that anytime you did anything, a little
Right.
pop-up came up with the number of casualties, civilian or otherwise,
Right.
caused when you sunk that
just
ship.
to just to
Yeah.
just to give you the sinking feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't be too elated that your globe master just threw,
Mhm.
12 largs at it. Right. So yeah,
And we've
absolutely.
now added,
Just
I was gonna say we've now added, barks to command, so now you can have little pop-ups kind of flash next to units. This wasn't in it wa didn't exist at the time when we were doing this, but that's a thing that, I hope to make use of going forward, is that kind of.
interesting. Like little,
Yeah,
um, almost like even you could even probably even use that for like little radio transmission type little simulations, if you will,
that was my
or just
ideas as
little.
well.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. That's the beautiful thing about Command. It's evolving, right? It's
Mhm.
one of those games that's still evolving. And I like, I mean, I know there is obviously the pro version and so forth. Um, I had heard, okay, you don't have to answer this if you can't, but I had heard there was rumor that multiplayer would come to the public version eventually. Is
I
that?
don't I honestly don't know. Like, I can't answer
Yeah.
because I don't know. The one thing I'd
Okay.
say is that every feature I've seen, with the exception of some of the analytical tools that were made for
Right.
Pro, did eventually
Right.
make their way into Civ. We
Right.
don't separate the 2 because, like, we hate people and we want them to be 2 separate things. We separate the 2, to be honest, because a lot of the Pro only features are in a lot rougher shape, because they're not meant for consumers on the market just playing. They're meant for professionals in a professional setting who can,
Right, and they were probably rapidly developed as
right.
such, right?
Yeah, they're not as, out of the box, I would say, is the way I would
Yeah,
describe
yeah,
it.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, that's cool. I just didn't know if it's like a known
Yeah, no, I
thing.
just had to set the record straight because there's a lot of people who think we're, like, hiding, like, amazing features away because, like, we hate, the non-pro community. It's like, no, 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 no. That's, the thing I tell people is when I play Command just in my off hours, I play CMO. I don't play PE.
Well,
So I
right, yeah, right, right. Because, well, oh, interesting. Well, that's interesting in and of itself.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if you've tried the PBM script. Musirka,
Mm,
he's a friend of mine online, and that's really good. I
yeah.
don't know if y'all might ever like more officially support that in some way. I don't know necessarily what else he needs. He's solved it pretty well, but it's kind of it's asynchronously oper or it's basically asynchronously visible to the individual, but it's actually the orders are actually happening at the same game time. Oddly enough, I don't know. I'll send you an image
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but so there is multiplayer capability out there in the
Yeah.
meantime, which I have to thank him openly. But yeah, that's the mission. But it's a 22-hour mission. So at this point, I've not finished it yet. I'm in the process of doing the mission, and I hope to be surprised by a few things, and I think I've already been surprised by a few things already. Um, so let me go ahead and just stop for a second, stop sharing,
Well, I really hope you enjoy it.
stop the infinite. Yeah, it's been great. Again, good size, good price. Honestly, I mean these showcases. I mean, it's a no brainer. Get it? I mean, it's less than a cup of coffee. I mean, you can't go wrong. And it's a big
I never
mission.
thought of
It's
it like
not just
that.
like a show. It's not a simple mission. It's well designed. It's unique. It does use all the new features, which is great. It is what it is. It is a showcase of those things, but also a unique environment and unique airframes. I think from other
Mhm.
published scenarios. It's great. It's got good descriptions, good planning, suggestions without being overly too suggestive. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
I
great.
really appreciate it.
I hope you do more. That's my next question. Are you working on anything else? That
I am.
everybody have like I mentioned this to Kevin W. Out of
Mhm.
Quantico at MCU, and he's like, yeah, it was great. He loves it too. Um, and others have mentioned that as well, that is a really good one. So I mean, I hope you're recognized as such internally to make sure.
Appreciate it.
So well, I guess one of my questions, I meant to ask this before, but what made you kind of make that jump then to this? Like what pushed you over the precipice to do this? Just requested, or you just had the idea and the burning thought to do it?
It's been something that I've wanted to do for a while, because I've always made scenarios, usually not for, like I said, not for public consumption, but for myself, or to play with friends, right? Um, like I said in the very beginning, my background is with puckstering for Marine Corps war games. So using that skill, I've done that with friends, right? Have friends make plans and I'd implement them for both sides into a scenario. So it's something that, there was a need for it,
Yeah.
and we needed somebody that, at least from my personal opinion, we needed somebody that was actually on the team. And I'm pretty perfectly situated because, like I said, half my job is doing the database. So I already know a ton of the stuff that's in there. I know if we're missing something, I can add it. I don't have to send in a request. It just kind of streamlines the process.
Right.
And like I said,
Sure.
it's something I've been dying to do. So when they said, "Hey, do you want to do scenarios?" I could not say yes quick enough.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I like when something kind of like naturally happens like that. That's neat.
Yeah, it was good logical evolution, I'd say.
Cool. Very good. Very nice to meet you, Jacob.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I hope we can talk again at some. Oh, hopefully you'll have another scenario at some point here.
Oh, I
Yeah.
do. I already got one in the oven.
Cool. Very good. A showcase, or are you gonna try to? Are you gonna eventually try your hand at a campaign?
Showcase for right now, and then on the docket next is a campaign. So
Awesome. That's cool.
yeah.
And somehow I've disappeared into the rough owl. But I
Don't
just
we
got
all?
sucked into the French void. Happens to the best of us. Uh, have a good one, and have a good one, audience, and go buy Desert Falcon. It's very good, worth it.
Appreciate it. You have a great one.